Welcome to Empower Half an Hour, a mental health podcast that brings firsthand interviews and testimonies to you.
Welcome to Empower Half an Hour. I'm your guest host, Derek Ford. Today we have the host of Empower Half an Hour, Brandon Spatz. Brandon has been a member of Miracle Clubhouse since 2016. He serves on their advisory board, as well as a few other committees in his community. Welcome to the show, Brandon.
Thanks for having me, Derek. Glad to be here.
Brandon, can you give us your mental health background?
So I'm diagnosed with Bipolar 1 disorder with psychotic features, OCD, Generalized Anxiety Disorder, childhood trauma, and Anorexia nervosa. I'd say the first time I'd realized that I had any symptoms of mental illness was back when I was in kindergarten. I actually had a pattern of intrusive thoughts that were contamination. So I went through a time where I was really deeming anyone that really was unkept, looked like they were sick. I deemed them as contaminated, and I would avoid them. Quite truly, I would avoid them, and because I didn't want to get sick. I didn't want to contaminate myself at a young age. That was really, it's kind of unusual for a 5 to 6 year old to have those kind of feelings and thoughts. The other thing was leaving the house was hard. When I was going to school, I had some intrusive thoughts and that led to compulsion. So I would always go out to get on the school bus. Like before I left the house, I'd have to run back to my room and do some rechecking, which was like my first real checking ritual. Those were really kind of the first things I can identify back at that age. I didn't get my formal diagnosis of OCD until I was 11, though. My first or second trauma was when my father was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin lymphoma back when I was 7 years old. Everything changed at that moment because it really affects the whole family. It's not one person that is affected. It's the whole entire family, and it just led to a whole bunch of uncertainty in life. I really struggled with knowing what was going on sometimes because at age 7, it's hard to understand, that your father is sick, your father might die from cancer, and it was really terrifying. I really wish it never happened, but that's not realistic. That's not life. I went through some emotional abandonment issues because of his cancer. He actually had to go to Cleveland Clinic for 2 months. My mom and my dad went up there so he could get a life-saving transplant of stem cells. So I actually stayed with me and my brother stayed with my grandparents for 2 months. And that was very disruptive in my childhood because I didn't get to see my parents. But in the same way, my grandparents were like my second parents. And it's always been like that, and I couldn't thank them enough for what they did for my family. And we're a very tight-knit family. We all always have been. But there's been so many obstacles we've come across, from my father's illnesses to later on my mental illness. Going through that was different in every way. Seeing him decline in health quickly, and seeing him go through chemo. I went to a lot of his appointments with him, and it was interesting because that's to this day, if I get blood test, I will wish he was there because I connected to him with that, with medical type of procedures, and that really led to self-harm. I didn't realize at the time it was self-harm, and it took me a long time to accept that I had self-harm history, with that. And I had so many different ways because I, in my mind, the way I could connect with my father was to feel pain. I to this day really struggle with when I feel pain. I feel a deep connection to my father. Every time I get sick, I have that kind of mindset, like my father went through this too, and that's how I feel connected to him. It's a very sick way of having connection, but in the same way, that's how I go through things. My first psychotic episode was when I was 11, so my father was in remission by that point, but in the same way, he still had complications. I remember that first night vividly. At times, I only remember bits and pieces because psychosis, I was in and out of reality. But I will tell you this, I remember hallucinating visually, auditory-wise, and then also tactile hallucinations, just laying on my bed at age 11, staring at the walls. And it was truly terrifying. There's a reason I don't watch horror movies, at least at that time, because I was living in a horror movie. There was no doubt about it. The things I've seen through hallucinations, the things I've heard, they still get me sometimes. And for an 11-year-old child to go through that was unusual, and in my mind, it was terrifying for my parents, I'm sure. They were in my room, I remember, and the light was on. My walls of my room were yellow. Just a thought I've had, because I associate the color yellow sometimes with things, but they were trying to figure out what to do with me because I was out of my mind completely. I wasn't making sense. I was terrified, and they got me to the psychiatric hospital. And I was always tall for my age. The reason I tell you this is because I really was put in the wrong age group in the psych hospital. They had a 13 to 18 group and a 12 to as low as it goes. And I was put, which 13 to 18-year-olds, you really honestly learn so much in a psych hospital, but also you can learn some bad things too. And I was not emotionally and mature enough to learn those things. And, some of these things were self-harm and drug abuse, and my brain could not wrap around it. And I struggled. I really did. I had a psychiatrist that was in the hospital I was assigned to, and she was very cold, super just no emotion on her face, and I don't do well with that. And it really led to when I got discharged, she was my psychiatrist, and she caused a lot of trauma through not explaining things. She just would prescribe medication. She would just treat my parents very cold, and it shouldn't be like that when you're dealing with a child. I don't get into that as much, so I'll leave it there. But I was struggling to figure out the next step once I got discharged, because I just started sixth grade. This was right before my sixth grade year. It was, I believe, July, and I had just turned 11 in June. It was disruptive. I struggled those sixth grade and seventh grade year to not only reestablish myself in the community, but also be a child. I was still 11, and I should just try to fit in, and I couldn't do that because I was still going in and out of psychosis. So that really led to another hospital stay about, I'd say, a year later, and I had my first manic episode around that time. I actually had one in the hospital because my original diagnosis before bipolar disorder was depression. But I had that episode in the hospital, and I've had so many psychiatrists now tell me, without a doubt, you're bipolar 1. That's never changed. And I believe it because I've been on that cycle of ups and downs most of my life. It's hard, looking back, it's really hard to tell, but it's like you can only analyze so much looking back at your past. But I've been dealing with mental illness now for 15 years, diagnosed, and I'm only 26. It's really crazy to think that, but it's a journey. It really is, and I really have learned a lot from it. So I was going on with the manic episode, and you get to that point where I was just so delusional, and I thought I could fly in the hospital, and this for my mother was terrifying. It was a good thing that they had all the windows, bolted closed and things like that, because who knows if I had the chance what I would have done. Because when you're delusional, you really truly believe that you can do anything, and I could have done that in my mind. Now, looking back right now, no way. No, not at all. It was just the delusional state I was in at such time. After having that diagnosis, I went to school and was still trying to get adapted to it. School was really challenging for me because dealing with a mental illness, your energy levels are already low, and the days that I did go to school, I really wasn't there all the way. I didn't get really fit in with any of the other kids. One of the hardest parts was my 8th grade year, right before going into high school. I lost my best friend that I had since kindergarten, really one of my only friends. And I had a psychotic episode in front of him. It just happened, and being that we were only like 13 at the time, that's a lot to go through for someone outside of your home that's not used to you going into a psychotic episode to see. I think I really scared the crap out of him, and I really am so sorry for that happening, but it was out of my control. And of course, after that day, things with that relationship just kind of slowly went away. I was really upset because this person I had known for so long, and I went through a lot of anger, a lot of frustrations because I was unsure like what happened, because I was still processing that incident of really going into psychosis in front of him. And to that was just a big support system part that was missing after that. I couldn't go to him because he didn't want to see me. So trying to adapt to that was definitely hard. Shortly after going on medications, I had a lot of weight gain from a side effect. And I was always skinny, I'd say, as a child. Used to love it. But that weight gain was so rapid, and my self-body image was just horrible. I hated everything about me. My self-esteem was gone. But in the same way, I couldn't stop gaining weight for a while. So I actually had to go to the lipid clinic, and it was so hard because this played a big role in my eating disorder mind, in my opinion. I was told to lose weight. I was told, given the resources I needed to lose weight of, a healthy diet, and then exercise routines. And it was, every appointment was the same, just going in, and that's what I was told. I was, if I gained more weight, then it was a bad appointment, and that was stuck in my mind. And I'll say more on that when I hit the eating disorder, on how impactful it was. Moving along to when I was going into my junior year of high school, I had a side effect from the one medication and just long-term use that made my thyroid stop working correctly, and I ended up losing weight that summer at a rapid pace because of that. And you think I would be thrilled because that's what I was, wanting all those years since I gained that weight. But even though I was less weight, I wasn't happy. I wasn't, my self-esteem was still down. My body image was just not where it should be. And I was crushed. I really was crushed that I didn't get that that real thought process change that I needed. I went into my junior year and I actually changed schools because I was going to a career center at that point. So I had a focus of study that I could kind of try out. And I ended up graduating from there 2 years later, and my father passed away from a second time of cancer. when I was in my senior year of high school. He passed away in October. And in my mind, I had prepared myself for this for 11 some years, that I was going to be crushed, that I was going to be, needing a psych hospital stay right away because, I thought I couldn't handle it. But your body and your mind are a strong, strong thing. They're capable of so much, and I didn't know that at the time. But I made it through. I was very emotional, but like I stayed strong, and I was able to keep going. And I think honestly, that's what my father would want. And just saying that, it sounds so weird because I've avoided talking about him in certain ways for different reasons. And it was really just, it was a relief as well, because we were in that time period of 11 years where he was sick. We had complications, surgeries, all these different things that was hectic. And it was in a way a relief, but in the same way, I lost my father. I lost my the person I could relate to a lot, my person that I loved. And I'm still working on that, because the truth is I never really grieved like I should have. I just held it in. I didn't do so well on that, and I'm still paying for that now. But one step at a time, and I'm okay with that. That's fine. No, he passed away, and I ended up graduating that year, and I needed to know my next step, because usually when you're graduating, a lot of people go to college. I wasn't sure. To be honest, what I was going to do. I knew I wanted to do some kind of further education, so I ended up finding a place through NAMI. They recommended Miracle Clubhouse in Dayton, Ohio, and it was amazing. It was truly amazing when I went in that day. I had so many realizations over the next year of, it's not just about me anymore, because oftentimes when we have mental illness, we're stuck in our own heads. They made me realize that, there's a bigger picture in this world, and, you can do so much more. They empowered me to become the best person I could be. And they saved my life, to be clear. They saved my life. They also, during that time when I was going there, I also went to college, community college, and I gave it a shot. I went through a couple semesters in software development, and I was struggling. I think it was above my head, which is okay. So I ended up changing to culinary, because my father was actually a cook for his life, and I gave it a shot. But a lot of things changed quickly, because, as I mentioned earlier, I have an eating disorder. I have anorexia nervosa. I started running. I had my first 5K, and I fell in love with running, because I had no prior, experience or any sports in high school or anything like that. And I just kind of went head in, because I have a very addictive personality. And I quickly got addicted to it. My life was secondary. Running was first. I had times where, like, I was in a manic episode for a while because of that, running high kind of also triggered the bipolar disorder to have those higher moods. It was really like, in one way, it was the time of my life, and the other way, it was just miserable, even though I didn't know it was miserable. It was hiding from me. I set out to do a half marathon. It was January. I signed up for the Air Force half marathon, and I was going to start training. So I signed up and started running with a group in Dayton, and it was really good fit. Really good friends I made along the way. And the hardest part was feeling like I was doing everything right. I thought I was doing everything right for running, but in the background I was starving myself. I was restricting calories. I was restricting my fluid intake, and like, when you do that, your brain gets so foggy and it just isn't working at full capacity. I started off just running with the marathon group. The other group started halfway through the summer, the summer, and I was like, all right, I'll just start with the marathon group and, see how it goes, even though I signed up for a half marathon. I loved it. I felt free, and I kept on running, and I had my first half marathon that I did in a training run. I went from Dayton area to Xenia. It was just so exciting. I was so proud of myself. I was, something I hadn't felt in a long time, because I went through periods of times where like I was never proud of myself. I never could do anything good enough, and this was that overall feeling that was amazing. Over the summer, I hit my first 20-mile run. Took me 4 hours, and I had a really good friend, and he said, why not just sign up for the full marathon? You're already over the half marathon distance. You're close to that 26.2 miles. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do that. So I changed over to the full marathon. Now, over this time, I was getting worse and worse, because I started around that time restricting fluids and food more and more. But all that was in the background in my mind, because in that mindset of identity that I never really thought I had, because I had something on Facebook, and an update about my running, and my friend put, now you're a runner, and that really stuck with me, because I had struggled with feeling, a true identity at times, and I just latched onto it, and I just went with it, because for that one time I just felt like, this is who I am. I ended up going on another 20-mile run. I mapped it out for days, and every single point where I was going to go. But this time was different. This time was close to 100-degree heat. This time took me 7 hours, because I was so deprived of liquids and food that whole day. And days before, I'm lucky I didn't pass out or worse. I wasn't thinking of any of that. I was just thinking of my next run, my next go-to of adrenaline. And I got about halfway, laid down on the grass, and just was just trying to get air, and laid there for about 10 minutes, and got back up like I always did, and kept running. I didn't see any warning signs there because I was so far gone at that point. I wasn't myself anymore, but the only one that could not see how bad I was myself. Everyone around me knew that I was losing weight. I was looking different, you know, and my health wasn't good in that time. And so moving to the marathon, a little bit before that, I had a hairline fracture on my foot. And I was supposed to be on crutches for a while, and I did it for like 2 weeks, and I'm like, I'm cured, but no, I wasn't. So I ended up running that marathon because nothing was going to stop me from completing my goal, my mission, you know. And it was another close to 100-degree temperature at the very beginning, and the Air Force Marathon goes by a flag system where they have different colors represent different levels of heat. Black flag is the highest, which is when they cancel that race. I had run and run, got to mile 20, about 4.5 hours, and it got black flagged. Now, one thing that I didn't realize about myself is I have addictive personality, as I said earlier. I didn't realize that about myself, but my mother knew that. But she was at the race and she was freaking out because they had 20 people, I believe, or quite a few people that had stretchers that had to be taken off by stretchers because of they passed out from the heat and dehydration. And I didn't see any of that because I was on the course, but she was worried. She didn't know if I was going to be the next one, but she also knew that even if it got canceled, that I would not stop. I would not stop because I was so gone and also so addicted to this running. Finally, they canceled it. And I had to be taken, all of us got on a bus and taken to the finish line and got our medals. But my friend was at the finish line waiting for me, and he made me on that day realize how bad I was because he saw me and he's like, all right, he's taken me over to the tent of the medicine tent, and he's sitting me down, making sure I get electrolytes in, and he says, you do not get up. Because he knew I would have gotten up and I wanted to walk back to the car, which was like a mile away, but he made me sit down. He's like, do not get up because you are not in a place where you are good right now. You're extremely dehydrated. And that's when I realized that, like, I really started to realize, like, I had a problem. And as the time went on after that race, I started to notice more and more things. I was lightheaded a lot more. I was just not there. So, of course, in college, I was a culinary major at that point, so I was leaning up against the equipment because I just was struggling to stand all day. I ended up going to a dietitian. My mom made me go, which I'm so thankful that she did, even if wasn't thankful at the time. But the dietitian told me, you are not to run until you gain weight. But to me, that was the worst case scenario. It was just the end of the world. So I began to purge. I was so unaware of how bad purging is. Trigger warning if anyone is listening with the eating disorder. The the content is necessary in my mind to stress. But I lost myself completely in 2 weeks with purging. I was doing laxative abuse and self-induced vomiting. The very beginning, I would only do it in my house, and I felt so disgusting and just guilty. But as the week went on, it just went out of control. I was driving to middle of the woods just to do it. I mean, because I had no control at that point of myself. It was, it was like an addiction, anything just to get my fix. My fix was self-induced vomiting, because it was all about controlling my weight because I couldn't have that running. I ended up going into a psychiatric hospital shortly after that for about a month, and then I was transferred to Denver, Colorado for residential treatment for 3.5 months for eating disorders. And I felt so alone, because there's a lot fewer of guys that are getting treatment when the numbers should be a lot higher. There's such stigma, attached to guys getting treatment for eating disorders, which is it's heartbreaking to me because it saved my life. It really did. But I met so many nice people. The ratio is like 30 girls to, I think, 3 guys at that point. But I met so many nice people, so many accepting people of who I was, and they made it also so much easier to be there for so long. Lifelong friends, truly. But I got out after 3.5 months, and I had more weight gain because of a medication side effect, and at the time I was restricting again. I didn't realize that eating disorders were so hard to break, and I'm still dealing with that to this day. It's been 5 some years, but recovery is not linear. There's no no solid pathway. You just have to keep working on it, and you have your good days and your bad days. I went back to Denver for a second time. Less than a year later, I relapsed and was there for 4 more months. It was a different experience because different people, but it was once again, a really good experience people-wise. But when it comes to the treatment for anorexia, it was so hard. The one thing I didn't realize, being that I was always with the other type of mental illnesses, I didn't realize how painful it was going through the refeeding process. Some days were just so hard. I was so grateful when it was over. And in the same way, I was also feeling that connection to my father constantly because of the pain. As I mentioned earlier, that was my one way of connecting to my father. It really was frustrating because at that moment I didn't want my father to see me in that kind of, scenario, because I just didn't want that. I didn't want him in my treatment life right there. I still struggle with trying to figure out why that was the case. Because I've always wanted to have him part of my life, but that one time I just felt like I couldn't have him seeing me like this. I couldn't have him seeing me struggling with food, because he was a cook, I guess. So I didn't want him to see me in that case. But yeah, so after getting back home from there, I decided to just continue to work on my recovery, continue to educate myself on everything I have. I always had one last thing that I had on my list of things to tackle, and it was trauma. I'm currently doing EMDR therapy, and I'm learning so much about myself and why I'm affected by my past experiences. Some things I didn't want to know, but some things I did. And that's my goal in recovery. The reason I bring up the thing that the trauma is because I'm not finished with that, and I'm okay with that. Recovery is a process. It's not once you reach it, you're done. That's not how life works. You just keep at it. You keep bettering yourself day to day. And that's why I started this podcast. So one of the reasons was I wanted to give a voice to people with mental health conditions that may feel voiceless or struggle with isolation. But the more we work together, the more we share our story on who we are, what we've been through, the more acceptance we can get as a community. And also, it's okay to say, I struggled with this. It's okay to get treatment. It doesn't make you less of a person. So that's why this podcast is going to serve for people with a story to share.
Thank you, Brandon, for giving us your testimony today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Empower Half an Hour. If you want to learn more, check us out at Instagram.com/EmpowerHalfAnHour. Have a great day.